Okay, Monday, September 26th. This is a pre-open SPY video, starting a new week here. There's about an hour and a half to go before trading. There's a lot of interesting cross currents in play here, and a lot of that depends on what type of trader you are. You're a day trader, a swing trader, position trader. With position trading, there are still you have to really look at the chart, and I'll do that in a second to show what targets are still available. Very short term, you can still continue when you see a big, moves down here day after day after day. There's exhaustion risk on one hand, but there are still targets on the other hand. So that becomes a little tricky as to, how you want to play it. So again, a lot of it depends on your time frame, but let's just go over what's developing here and maybe some of the key things to monitor depending on your trading style. So obviously, we end the week with a big red week last week. This is the weekly chart coming down. Again, this is the type of thing, whether it's with the SPY or with individual stocks, that I'm looking for. As we continue lower and have a little bit of exhaustion risk to the downside, you just want to look back on the chart. And I'll look at Apple in a minute here as a good example. And you want to see if there's any targets to keep momentum going. In other words, I need to know that there's a strong target in play. And so far on the SPY, there's still this low to be taken out. So even though we've come down for 3 days in a row, let's say, and you can see here pre-market, we're kind of drifting a little lower. We're still at the bottom of yesterday's range. There's still room to head to that yellow line. So there's still an opportunity in the very short run to play kind of a red breakout here early in the session and see if we get down there or not. But there's also the potential at any moment to start above the midpoint of any prior day and have some strong rallies in here just temporarily. If we go to the monthly chart, just to review that, we have one more week to go before this ends. So this will be interesting. We reached our target down here. So again, you reach targets. The question is, are you going to get continuation or failure? And since you have another target very close, you could feel somewhat comfortable after reaching a target. You might be heading a little, more in the same direction before any potential exhaustion takes place. So that's kind of the theme at the moment, even though, day to day, I'm always looking at the pre-market range and I want to start green above that range to have any potential to go higher, red below it to go lower. You really have to kind of look individually and see, what each stock is what story is taking place on the various time frames. So yeah, and the SPY, I guess my main thought here is that we still have to come down and take out that target here. So that could happen very early in the session. Let's say this session, you can see the bottom blue line here is close to the yellow line. And then at that point, who knows, the way you get reversals if you're going to start lower, is to come back above the midpoint of the first of the prior bar. So look for that as any sign of reversal. If not, we're heading lower. The other thing obviously is to move up strongly, green bar above the midpoint of the prior bar. That's the upper end of this range, and maybe you get a big rally today first. And at that point, you want to see if how this weekly bar begins, if we start taking out the midpoint of the weekly bar or not. If not, then expect some kind of rollover because we still have this target down here. So they're those type of things. If I go to, like I said, to Apple, just to give you an example of, I can look at any stock or many stocks, but I decided to look at Apple as a good example. Like here was a day where you had a big green rally, right, from after kind of exhaustion to the downside. So you always look for that. This is on the, what date was that? The September 19th. So if I go to the 19th, there it is. Look for this. You can start down low. If you have a big green bar to the upside and then you immediately follow through and it's above kind of the halfway point of the prior day, that could be a strong, buying might come in this morning and you can get that kind of move and follow through. And you can see here, you have the opportunity for one push up, two push up. Sometimes you get this big green bar and you only, instead of this immediate follow through, you get like a retrace to the midway point and then you get another green bar up. You can maybe buy that as well. So look for that. I mean, that's a possibility. And then here's an example where, you're coming down, 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 and look at this day. You kind of went lower, but you didn't really follow through much. And why is that? If you go back on the chart, after having exhaustion to the downside, there was this low right here. That was the target, and you can see it took that out very quickly. That's the day before. So you knew you had a target. I'll mark it on the chart here as it was coming down on that day. Yeah, it was right there approximately. Well, You're right there. If you look at the 15-minute chart, that was it. That was the target in play. So you had that weak opening right there on the 18th, and you could see it went immediately down, but it only went for one bar, and then it consolidated the rest of the day before eventually starting this kind of reversal. So when you know the target's in play, early on, you kind of can maybe sense how much momentum you can get. I'd much prefer days like this where you're having well, let's say up in here where you have kind of a downward bias, you rally a little bit, and then you get the two down, and at least you have a target here, a target here, a target here, and you have all kinds of targets that you can either hit in one day or a few days. So that's why ideally you're still looking for rallies, and failures to sell, to be a little bit more, and then watching the opening price action. Once that, gives you the bias for the day, you have a lot of, room targets and, bigger targets to hit. Whereas when you're down here, it's tricky to know that. Now, Apple is a good example. Here's the daily chart. Are we right now? We're not near the end. Yeah, that's fine. That's today. So, I mean, you can still see we do have this target to hit down here. So any weak opening, we can still take that out. And the question is, are you going to get follow through or not? And you got to look back on the prior chart, on the weekly chart. The interesting thing here is you do have kind of a pivoty, machine gunny kind of thing. So on this continuation lower, there's definitely room to continue. This type of chart does have room to continue lower and lower and lower. So once we take out this daily target, you could get a little extension, And that's the thing. You got to look at each stock individually, or the market as a whole. So I'm still obviously biased to the downside. Let's finish up with the SPY. There's still one more target to hit. I'm not, you never know what kind of action you're going to get in terms of the first move of the day, but we'll watch for that and see if we get red below the pre-market lows. But, keep in mind, at some point, this is what I also expect, especially if we hit this yellow target, and after all this, there's going to be some powerful green moves here, at least for day trading. So keep that in mind. And like I said, it's going to look like Apple, on that day where you kind of immediately start up with a big green bar, and those will be the stocks to just play once targets are hit that you can play to the upside. So this would be example, on the SPY, once this yellow line's hit, you could get comfortable maybe on a few days playing for these kind of powerful up moves, because they're gonna happen here at some point. But the important thing is how this month's gonna close. We have 1 week to go, 5 more trading days. Let's really see where that takes us. And I was gonna get into this, but if we can really close red and not rally up too much this week, then you have, what's interesting is you have this big monthly bar as the target low. And when I really look, you see I drew a yellow line down there as our next target. And when I go to the weekly chart and look at that, that also aligns. There'll be a little target here to hit. Let me see if it's easy to see. Yeah, I mean, it's this bar right in here. These targets should be hit, which is like more the 3,500 area. And then at that point, you have a little gap in here. So that could be, if we're coming down, I could see maybe, because we're at 36, maybe we're going to get a little continued momentum here to take out these targets without much of a rally. But then there's a definite little gap in here that could spark, in my opinion, where some buying, you already have this thing following through on a much lower low. Typically these things make lower lows, and then try to reverse. We can come down a little bit right into here, like that 30, and then at that point that could be where you get that little short-term rally as we potentially head down to this much lower target on the monthly chart, and that's going into October down here. So keep in mind that we'll get to that when the time comes, that there is an area down here we could be hitting, and that's why you still can get a little momentum here on the downside with maybe just brief pauses along the way. Not a strong rally, but we'll find out. And then, at that point, since you kind of had the channel going down a lower low in here, maybe you can bounce a little bit in here in October for a few days before really starting back down to that target. So we'll keep that in mind. So anyway, let's see what happens today. So far, about an hour and a half to go. Here's the opening range. We'll just see, if we, at some point, you're not going to, some of these markets, they start up a little bit, they fail and they go down. That's what we've been experiencing a lot of. At some point, you're going to get a strong rally out of there. So keep, it's just going to be that opening green bar, and relative to these highs and lows and relative to the midpoint of the prior day, that's going to be, the sign whether to try longs. If not, then expect continued downside for now, at least to this target. And like I said, probably a little bit lower here as well before any real, powerful rally happens in the short term.